Listen to me carefully, because what you're about to discover, you won't find it on TikTok and you won't read it in those blog articles that say women are just complicated or that it's all about chemistry. No, we're going deeper than that, into something unspoken but deeply felt. Because when a woman loses interest, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not random. And it's not because you found someone else or because she's emotionally unstable. There is a reason, a real reason. One that most men never understand, which is exactly why they keep making the same mistakes over and over again in every relationship. So if you've ever been in that situation where everything seemed to be going well, but suddenly she starts to act distant, colder, slower to respond, and that spark just fades into silence, stay. Because this is no coincidence, and while it might not be your fault, it is your responsibility to understand it. Today, your eyes open. Neil Strauss, author of the infamous The Game, said it bluntly: "Attraction is built, but it can also be destroyed, and most men don't realize when they're digging their own emotional grave." And that's exactly what happens when a woman begins to lose interest. It's not black magic, it's a process. One that you, if you're self-aware, can reverse, prevent, and even master. But to do that, you need to understand the rules, the real ones, the deep psychological mechanics behind female attraction. Not the surface-level advice you get in 5-minute YouTube videos with epic music in the background. No. The truths found in books most men never finish. The truths taught by men like Robert Greene, David Deida, and those silent seducers who never boast, but always get what they want. And if you think this is about being nicer or communicating better, you're miles off. Because a woman's interest is not sustained by sweet words or punctual flowers. A woman's desire feeds on your energy, your mystery, your presence, and above all, your ability to not become predictable, needy, or emotionally weak. Female desire, as Esther Perel explains brilliantly, requires space, tension, and contrast. If you become the man who is too available, who answers every message within seconds, who is always there with no sense of challenge, no edge, suddenly you're no longer the lover, you're the brother, and that's the beginning of the end. We're going to take this apart, piece by piece. Every element that leads a woman to emotionally disconnect. But we're not staying on the surface. We're going into the raw, the uncomfortable, the truths. Because if you want to wake up a woman's desire and keep it burning over time, you need to stop acting like every other man. You need to stop being a provider of attention and start being an emotional experience, a psychological challenge, an enigma that she can't solve with one answer. Are you ready to hear what no one else dares to say? Good. Let's start with the most common mistake men make right after they've won a woman's attention. They believe the game is over, that they no longer need to seduce her. And that's where everything starts to collapse. Because once a woman feels like there's nothing more to discover in you, her desire fades. And the worst part? She won't say it out loud. She won't scream that she doesn't feel the same. She'll simply start to respond with less emotion, look at you differently, keep her phone further away when you text, and you, confused, will try harder. You'll plan more things, be more romantic. And the harder you try, the colder she becomes. Because you're not solving the real problem. She doesn't need more of you. She needs less of the same. David Deida said it perfectly. The feminine desires to be penetrated by a masculine presence that does not waver. So what kills that presence faster than anything else? Insecurity, fear of loss, emotional dependence. That's the true killer of female desire. Because when you begin to doubt yourself, your value, your ability to hold your center without needing her, she feels it. You don't need to say a word. Your body, your eyes, your tone, it screams insecurity without you realizing it. And at that moment, her interest begins to die. Because deep down, a woman wants to feel the pull of a man who can live without her. A man who has his own gravity. A man who doesn't emotionally collapse the second she pulls away a little. Because if you collapse, you're no longer the pillar, you're no longer the fire, you're the wounded boy. And that's not who she wants to sleep with. Now listen carefully. I'm not telling you to fake being cold or distant. That's another trap. Women can sense a man who's wearing a mask from a mile away, who's pretending to be confident but is secretly terrified of being abandoned. The answer isn't pretending, it's becoming. Becoming the kind of man who truly doesn't depend on her validation, who can enjoy her but doesn't need her, who can value her but doesn't worship her. And to do that, you need to face your own voids, your own insecurities. Because if you don't, they will always come to the surface and she will feel them. It won't matter how handsome you are, how sweet your texts are, or how many times you tell her she's special. If she senses that your value is built on her attention, she will never see you the same again. That's why one of the most destructive mistakes is becoming her entertainment, her emotional pacifier, her constant companion. Because at first, it feels good. She tells you she loves talking to you, that she adores how present you are, and you think it's connection. But in reality, you're training her subconscious to see you as a man with nothing better to do, as a man who's always available, because he has no greater mission in life. And that's a screaming sign of low value. Because a man of high value, a man who walks his path with purpose, doesn't bend over backwards to chase a woman. He doesn't ignore her, but he never forgets who he is. Female attraction is not maintained through effort. It's maintained through essence, and if your essence dissolves every time a woman shows you affection, you're losing the game before you've even started. The painful truth is, most men think the problem starts when the woman begins to pull away. But no, the real problem starts long before that. It begins when you, without realizing it, start losing yourself in her. When your days revolve around her replies, her texts, her mood. And in that moment, you stop being you. You become a reflection of what you think she wants. And that, for a woman, is an emotional death sentence. Because desire isn't born from control. It's born from uncertainty, from contrast, from respect, from watching a man who can hold her tightly, but also walk away if she stops showing up. Good, because now we're going into the deeper layer, where most men never dare to look. The reason isn't just that you became too available or that you stopped being a challenge. That's part of it. But what truly makes a woman lose interest is when you stop making her feel. Let that sink in. Attraction isn't about logic. It's not about your resume, your car, or how stable you are. It's about emotion, raw emotion, the kind that bypasses her rational mind and hits her nervous system. Women don't fall for men who make perfect sense on paper. They fall for men who make them feel something. Excitement, tension, unpredictability, security, but with a spark of danger. If you become emotionally flat, predictable, and safe in the wrong way, you're done. Because what you're offering her is no longer desire, it's comfort. And comfort alone doesn't create passion. Let me explain something that most dating coaches avoid, because it's uncomfortable. Women are wired for emotion, not chaos but movement, emotional variety. And when your emotional tone stays the same, kind, nice, sweet, predictable, day after day, week after week, you're giving her the same flavor over and over again. And even if it's a flavor she once craved, eventually, she stops tasting it. Not because she changed, but because you stopped evolving. Robert Greene talks about seduction as a form of art. And like any art form, it needs contrast, rhythm, subtlety. A seducer doesn't just show up and say, "Here I am, love me." He builds a landscape of feeling. He creates highs and lows, intensity and space, presence and mystery. And what happens to most men once they feel they've secured a woman's affection? They stop creating. They fall into the illusion of maintenance. They think that by doing more of the same, sending sweet texts, being reliable, planning predictable dates, they're keeping her interested. But what they're actually doing is numbing her senses. Here's something you probably haven't heard. Many women don't leave because they're unhappy. They leave because they feel numb. And that numbness comes from a man who stopped playing with tension, who forgot how to be the flame and instead became the candle she never lights anymore. You see, emotional stimulation doesn't mean drama. It doesn't mean being toxic or manipulative. That's the shallow interpretation. What it means is this: if you want her to stay engaged, you must stay alive, fully alive, deep in your purpose, constantly pushing your edges, not just for her, but for you. Because a man who is in motion, who evolves, who grows and surprises even himself, is a man who is unpredictable in the right way. And that unpredictability, that's what makes her check her phone when she sees your name. That's what makes her wonder what you're thinking when you don't text back instantly. That's what makes her feel again. Let me tell you a secret most men never discover. Seduction doesn't end when she says yes. That's when it starts. And that's where men fail. They think once she's in their arms, the pursuit ends. But the best seducers, they know the pursuit is eternal. Not out of desperation, but out of devotion to the game, the dance, the flame. And women? They can tell the difference between a man who still sees her as a mystery and one who sees her as a certainty. Now, let's go even deeper. Have you ever wondered why women get bored of men who treat them like queens? Why they drift away from guys who give them everything, say yes to everything, compromise at every turn? It's not because women are ungrateful. It's because those men are boring. And here's the paradox. The more you give without polarity, the less she wants what you offer. Why? Because you're giving from a place of lack. You're giving hoping to get her affection in return. And women feel that. They feel when your attention is a currency, not a gift. They feel when you're overcompensating for insecurity. And that's when something inside her starts to shift. She stops looking at you with wonder and starts looking at you with obligation. She feels the weight of your emotional neediness, even when you say nothing. And desire cannot survive in a space where one person is constantly trying to prove their worth. So what does survive? Polarity, tension, the dance of masculine and feminine. She wants to feel your groundedness, not your desperation, your direction, not your uncertainty. She wants to know that even if she walks away, you'll still be that man, unshaken, unbroken, focused, driven. The reason women lose interest is not because you're a bad person. It's because you stopped being the source of emotional contrast in her life. You became a neutral background noise instead of a spark. And sparks don't fade because they're too bright. They fade because they stop moving. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two men. One is always available, always sweet, always agreeable. He checks in constantly. He never disagrees. He puts her first in everything. Sounds like the perfect man, right? Now imagine the second. He's warm, but not always available. He listens deeply, but isn't afraid to challenge her. He has his own goals, and he doesn't sacrifice them for her. He sometimes pulls away, not out of manipulation, but because he's chasing something bigger than himself. He gives her space to miss him, to wonder about him, to feel the absence of his presence. Who do you think she'll crave? You already know the answer. You don't need to become cold. You don't need to play mind games, but you do need to reclaim your edge, your mystery, your self-respect. Because when you lose those, you don't just lose her interest, you lose yourself. And trust me, she feels that long before you do. Let's go further, because what I'm about to reveal now separates the men women forget from the ones they never stop thinking about. Attraction, real attraction, doesn't just happen on the surface. It's biological, psychological, emotional, and, most importantly, energetic. And this is where most men go completely blind. They think attraction is about being hot or saying the right things at the right time. But the truth is, women lose interest when your energy shifts from leading to chasing, when your masculine frame begins to collapse inward. Let me explain this through the lens of polarity. Polarity is what creates sexual tension. Masculine energy is direction, depth, stillness, purpose. Feminine energy is flow, emotion, movement, expansion. In the beginning, attraction explodes because there's clear polarity. Usually, you're leading, she's responding. You're grounded, she's drawn in. But over time, without even realizing it, many men unconsciously start mirroring the feminine. They become reactive, emotional, easily thrown off. They seek harmony instead of challenge, agreement instead of leadership, comfort instead of truth. And in doing so, they neutralize the very polarity that made her crave them in the first place. A woman doesn't lose interest because you argued with her. She loses interest because you stopped leading the emotional tone of the interaction. You stopped being the grounding force. And she had to fill the space you vacated. She had to start leading. And that's when her attraction starts to quietly die. Women don't want to be the ones pulling you forward. They want to feel you pulling life toward you. And that doesn't mean being controlling. It means being so aligned with your values, your direction, your standards, that you're not afraid to walk away from what doesn't match it. Most men never reach this point. They don't want to risk losing her, so they fold. They say yes when they mean no. They suppress their truth. And every time they do, their masculine core weakens just a little more. Until eventually, she feels like she's with a man who's lost himself. Let's bring this into something even more raw. Have you ever noticed how women often fall hardest for the man who wasn't trying? The one who was focused on his life, on his goals, on his vision? The man who didn't obsess over whether she liked him because he was too busy building something that mattered. That's not an accident, that's nature. You see, feminine energy is drawn to strength. Not just physical strength, but energetic presence. A man who knows who he is, who doesn't flinch in the face of uncertainty, who doesn't need her to feel whole. When you become that man, women don't just stay interested. They invest, they lean in, they pursue. Because deep down, they want to surrender to something they can trust. And that trust isn't built through words. It's built through consistency, through standards, through how you hold yourself when she tests you. Because yes, she will test you. She'll pull away to see if you chase. She'll disagree to see if you fold. She'll act cold to see if you break. And it's not because she's cruel. It's because she's wired to search for strength. And strength is not shown through dominance. It's shown through stability, through how you respond when your ego gets hit. Here's something most men never realize. Women don't want perfect men. They want real men. Men who can be open without being weak, who can be emotional without losing direction, who can be kind without being spineless. If you collapse into neediness, she may not say a word. She may smile and nod and go along with everything you say, but inside, she's drifting. Her desire is already packing its bags, because deep in her feminine core, she doesn't want to lead. She doesn't want to mother you. She wants to relax into your presence, a presence that can hold her complexity without needing to fix it. A presence that says, "I've got this. I don't need you to behave for me to stay grounded." That is what makes a woman stay. That is what makes her trust your masculine, and when she trusts that, she opens. Now, let's talk about another silent killer of attraction: validation-seeking behavior. When a man constantly looks for signs that she still likes him, through texts, compliments, reassurance, what he's really doing is revealing uncertainty in his own value. And here's the brutal truth. The more you need to ask if she still wants you, the more she begins to question why she did in the first place. Women are intuitive. They don't just listen to what you say, they feel your inner state. If you're unsure of yourself, even if you speak with confidence, she will feel the gap. And when a woman senses that gap between your words and your energy, she begins to mistrust your masculinity. That mistrust doesn't create drama, it creates indifference. She starts replying slower. She cancels plans. She loses that emotional hunger she once had for you. But here's the kicker. She probably won't tell you what's really going on, because she may not even know consciously. She just feels that something is off. Something is missing. That mysterious fire you once carried now feels like a flicker. And slowly, she detaches. That's the real reason why women lose interest. Not because something suddenly changed in her, but because something gradually changed in you. Now let me ask you something raw and uncomfortable. When was the last time you walked into a room, fully grounded in your power, without needing a single person there to validate you? When was the last time you spoke your truth, even when it risked making her upset, not because you wanted to fight, but because you refused to betray yourself? When was the last time you were so on fire with your own purpose that she had to come closer just to feel the heat? That's the man she doesn't lose interest in. That's the man she orbits around even when life gets chaotic, even when things get uncertain, because that man is the flame. And women never forget the flame. Let's bring all of this into sharp focus, because now you know the truth. A woman doesn't lose interest overnight. It's a slow drift, a quiet erosion, and it always starts the moment you abandon your core, when you trade your masculine edge for comfort, when you stop being the flame and become the smoke. She loses interest when you no longer make her feel, when you stop leading with presence, when your energy shifts from grounded and sovereign to insecure and reactive. And maybe you didn't notice it at first. Maybe you thought being kind, agreeable, always available would win her loyalty. But the truth is, that's not what her feminine desires. Her body, her heart, her instincts crave a man who can hold himself, with or without her approval. And this isn't about becoming some cold, distant alpha caricature. That's just another mask. This is about remembering who the hell you are, what you stand for, what you're building with your life. This is about returning to the version of you that doesn't chase, because he attracts, who doesn't beg, because he chooses, who doesn't get lost in her attention, because he's already anchored in his own presence. That is the real reason why women stay interested, not because of what you do for them, but because of who you are when they're around you, and who you are when they're not. So if you felt a woman slipping away, don't panic, don't chase, don't become a shell of the man you once were. Instead, rise. Rise back into your masculine. Reclaim your direction. Cut off the neediness at the root. And become the man she remembers before you started trying to earn her love. Because here's the secret. When you become that man, you don't need to keep her interested. She keeps herself interested, just to stay close to you. If this message struck a nerve, it's because you're ready. You're ready to stop living in confusion and start walking with clarity. You're ready to stop repeating the same patterns and become the man women don't want to walk away from. So if you want more content that opens your eyes like this, if you want to understand attraction, psychology, seduction, and masculine power on a deeper level, subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what part hit the hardest. Because when you engage with this, it helps this message reach more men who need to hear it. Men who are tired of guessing, tired of being told to just be nice. Men who are ready to wake the fuck up. And if you're one of them, welcome.